Hello, this is Tim Dodge, AVP of Research and Information at Big Eye, New York. And given the news this week about the severe winter weather that hit the South and the Midwest, particularly Texas, I thought it might be worthwhile to take a look at a few different homeowners policies and see how they would apply to the kinds of losses you see during severe winter weather. Now, what I'm going to show you is a sample of what some homeowners insurance policies say about the various risks of loss from severe winter weather. Probably haven't covered every possible scenario, but this will give you a flavor. I've left the names of the insurers anonymous. I do have copies of several carriers' homeowners insurance policies and endorsements. I decided to leave them anonymous just so that you could compare the language without me implying that one company was better than another one. What the real message I want you to take away from this is that the policies differ from one insurer to another. We are going to see, in some cases, very slight differences in wording. In other cases, fairly significant. So the lesson here is that to find out how a specific policy applies to a specific loss, you really need to read that policy, read its terms and conditions, and see what it says, as we're about to see. I want to start with losses that might be covered. And when you have temperatures in the single digits, like we saw in Texas and places like El Paso that are a rock's throw from Mexico, they're not ready for that. They don't have the insulation on the pipes. So you could have pipes burst and that could cause water damage. And that might be covered. So you can see here one policy says defines the peril of freezing as the freezing of a plumbing, heating, or air conditioning system or household appliance, but only if you take care to maintain heat in the building or if you shut off the water supply and drain it. Now, what we saw in the South this week was people had no clue that things were going to get this bad. And so they tried to maintain heat in the building, but a lot of them have lost power. Some of them have been without power the entire week. So it would have seemed to me that this particular policy would cover that event. And you see that with some of these other provisions as well. We don't cover any loss caused by water freezing in a plumbing or household appliance. If the structure is vacant, unoccupied, or being constructed, unless, again, you used reasonable care to maintain heat in the building. So this one limits the exclusion a little bit by limiting its application only to vacant, unoccupied, or buildings under construction. Last one is very similar. Coverage for freezing of a plumbing system or a household appliance, but only if you've used reasonable care to keep the residence premises heated or drain the water. So you can see very slight differences in wording there, but that one in the middle on top there seems to be a little broader than the other. Another coverage that might be provided under homeowners policies, if you get a lot of ice, and we did see some ice storms in the South this week that could take down trees. And you can see by looking at the screen here, the policies vary somewhat. One pays up to $1,000 for the reasonable expense to remove trees felled by the weight of ice, snow, or sleet, provided the tree covers a damaged structure or is blocking the driveway or something like that. The next one provides only $500 coverage, and then the one on the bottom provides up to $1,500 coverage. The one on the bottom also doesn't put any restriction on where the tree fell. It doesn't have to be on the house. It doesn't have to be blocking the driveway. If the ice causes a tree to tip over, carrier will pay $1,500 to get that thing out of there. Whereas some of these others, coverage is more limited. It has to be on the house or blocking a driveway, and you can see the dollar amounts vary. Another one that might be covered is damage caused by the weight of ice and snow. Very similar wording here. One policy says peril means the weight of ice, snow, or sleet, which causes damage to property contained in a building. Okay, so we're talking about furniture, clothing, gym equipment, whatever is inside the building, and the roof caves in because there's too much ice on it, then that would be covered. Do you see a second one here that says weight of snow, ice, or sleet, which causes damage to a building or the property contained in the building. So this goes a little bit further and says it's going to cover the building and the contents, but then it puts limitations on the types of property that will be covered. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then the last one says Damage to personal property in a building structure, but only if the structure is damaged due to the weight of ice and snow. So you can see two of these only apply to contents. One of them applies to the building and the contents, but puts limits on what sorts of structures are covered. And refrigerated property. Some people who were without power for a long time now have refrigerators full of spoiled food. And this one on the left here, that's an endorsement to the policy. So it's not automatically included. These other two seem to be built into the policies. Well, the one in the upper left there is an additional coverage, and the one in the lower, I'm sorry, the one in the upper right, the one in the lower right is actually built into the policy. And you can see that one on the lower right provides $500 coverage, but doesn't change the deductible. The one in the upper right basically just adds coverage for refrigerated property without changing the limit or without any sort of limit, sublimit or a deductible. And then the one on the left pays up to $500 for spoiled food and applies a special deductible. So if this happens, regardless of what your deductible is on the deck page, your deductible for spoiled food would be only $100. So if you had $500 worth of spoiled food in your fridge, this policy would pay $400 for that. Now, what might not be covered? Certain types of property. I mentioned this earlier. Damage caused by freezing, thawing, pressure, or weight of ice to certain types of property. These tend to be structures you find outside: fences, swimming pools, patios, foundations, walls, retaining walls, piers, wharves, or docks if you have waterfront property. This next one says, this goes a step further. This excludes damage to septic systems or hot tubs. Some of these others also exclude damage to hot tubs. Freezing, thawing, pressure of weight of snow or ice to a swimming pool, including its filtration, circulation systems, fence, driveway, roadway, walkway, patios, and something very similar in that one on the bottom there. So again, you have an exclusion. Most policies have an exclusion like this, but how broad the exclusion is going to vary from one to another, particularly if your insured has hot tubs and obviously aren't going to disconnect them and haul them inside for the winter. This one in the upper right corner might not be the best choice for that insured. Losses that might not be covered: damage to outdoor property caused by the weight of ice, snow, or sleet. And these are very similar. The one in the middle, actually, I had on an earlier slide because it does affirmatively give that coverage and then excludes the types of property you see there listed: awnings, fences, patios, pavements, swimming pools, foundations, what have you. And then the others just say that the coverage applies to weight of ice, snow, or sleet that causes damage to property contained in a building. By implication, that means that the property is outside the building. There's no coverage for that if it's damaged, again, by the weight of ice, snow, or sleet. Power failure. And I'm going to give the broad exclusion first and then get into the exceptions in a minute here. But in general, a loss caused by power failure is not going to be covered. Now, again, I saw a couple of policies that don't have this exclusion in there, so they might cover this. But if somebody loses power for 2 days and is an inconvenience, for example, there's no coverage for that. Usually it says it's the failure of power or other utility service if the failure takes place off the resident's premises, but if it causes a covered cause of loss, burst pipes, for example, that would be covered. So they all make an exception for that in general there's no coverage for power failure, but if elsewhere in this policy we've said that a certain event is covered and the power failure caused that, then you're going to have coverage for that. But again, notice the differences in the wording. Some refer to the definition of residence premises. Some refer to failure of power utility service if the failure takes place off the residence premises. So the wording is slightly different. The intent is generally the same. But again, I saw a couple of policies that have this, that don't have this exclusion at all. They're obviously much broader, might be more expensive, but if that's important to your insured, then it's something to consider. Now, policies, a lot of them will provide coverage for a loss caused by a power surge. So the power goes out for 2 days and then it kicks back on, and this flood of electricity comes into your house and lights up your circuits. Well, that could damage delicate machinery or equipment. And you can see here a couple guys playing a video game on a big screen TV. A lot of policies don't cover loss to transistors, electronic components, circuitry that are part of computers, home entertainment units. So you have coverage for power surge except for the stuff that really matters. And you can buy mechanical breakdown or other type of coverage to fill that in. Notice this one in the middle here. This is in the list of covered perils, and it just says sudden and accidental damage from artificially generated electrical current. Period. No exception for electronic equipment, no exception for transistors or circuits. That's the broadest coverage I found in any policy. It covers that as a peril with no limitation. And then the one on the bottom is very similar to the one on the left. It refers to electrical appliances, devices, fixtures, and wiring. It doesn't get as specific as the one on the left because it doesn't say computers or home entertainment units. I think you could expect the insurance company to say that a computer or a home entertainment unit, a TV, is an electrical appliance and therefore would not be covered for power surge. And most policies, not all, but most, say that they don't cover loss caused by weather conditions unless those conditions result in a covered cause of loss. So for example, the one on the left here, this exclusion applies only if weather conditions contribute in any way with a cause of loss that is already excluded. So if weather conditions result in a burst pipe, that's the example I keep coming back to, then that would be covered because the policy says that it covers water damage caused by water escaping from a plumbing system, assuming that you took care to maintain the building. And then the other one says weather conditions that contribute in any way with the cause of loss excluded in this section. So if something is excluded in one part of the policy, you can't claim, well, it wasn't really caused by that, it was caused by the weather. The insurers have covered it both ways, saying that we're not covering something that was caused by the weather if that caused an excluded cause of loss. So that is a real brief tour through the way various homeowners policies treat severe winter weather and the hazards that you see this time of year. I think this is going to be really important to people in the South and the Southwest right now as they're dealing with the after effects of what has really been a pretty unique weather event. We've had regions of the country see temperatures they haven't seen since the late 80s, which is just amazing. So I hope you have found this presentation helpful, and thank you for watching. My name is Tim Dodge, and this is Big Eye, New York.